Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Halloween edition of Not Financial Advice. My beard is kind of white because I had some scary clown thing going on. Sean, what are you supposed to be?
This is Coach Lasso. I'm here to help all of our listeners get better at what they do in the world of investing.
Okay. First question of the day. It's been 2 weeks. We got to ask the question. I'm going to pose the question to you, and that'll be a springboard for our discussion.
Sure.
Million bucks, Meta or Amazon over the next decade. You can't pull out until 2030.
This is the only investment I make. There's no portfolio. There's nothing else. There's no real estate. Or
You got to ride with Zucks or with Angie Jassy. You got to pick one of them.
Yeah, I think I got to go Amazon, and I'm going to tell you why.
Wow.
I'm going to tell you why, though. I think that there is. You already know that I like Meta because of the asymmetrical side of it. So we can talk about both, but I'll tell you why on Amazon. I think that within a decade, Amazon will no longer be one company. I think Amazon will be Amazon. I think it'll be AWS cloud services. I think you'll also have other spinoffs down the road because I think it's only a matter of time until we see some sort of large activist come on board that demands either higher margins or a breakup. And I think higher margins are going to be tough to do in their business. So I think it's going to lead to a breakup most likely. And that's why, to me, although I love Meta for the potential gains, I think those gains might be possible at Amazon. Now, if Amazon was not as low as it was right now, I wouldn't be as excited about it, but these prices it's just too low. This is a really funny time. We didn't prep this conversation, by the way, if anyone's wondering. There was an Amazon truck out front of my house earlier today. And actually, this is a true story. Anytime I see someone ever, whether it's like a DHL or a FedEx or UPS or whatever, I immediately go outside and I start talking them up about like, hey, how many packages a day you're delivering? How full is the truck? What's overtime look like? How many people are working in the area? And they're always super nice people working hard. And I'm telling you, people don't do their research the right way. The Amazon driver today told me he had 185 packages within a 3-mile radius on just his truck. And
okay, but to be fair, the Amazon retail business is shit. Like it's not what makes them money, right? So
what's the interpretation of that? The interpretation is that they have to have multiple trucks just to handle last mile delivery, which in turn means for UPS and FedEx, there's still massive opportunity to take that back based on pricing. So there's a bigger play at hand in short-term transportation. So what I'm looking for is, are there other providers in the area? Does this mean automation? Does this mean logistics plays? Who is going to ultimately win that battle and get it all? Because right now it's a little bit of everybody. It's a very fragmented approach to doing it.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. You know, this idea of asking people in research, I was literally just came from a little Halloween gathering and there were 5 kids, all 13 years old. And immediately I asked them, what app do you guys use? And it reminded me of you because, and I was looking for the TikToks. I was looking for the not Facebooks. I was looking for the Instagrams. I got the Snapchats.
Everybody.
I got the Snapchats. I was like, why? They're like, just send pictures. Like,
so, my oldest is 12 and I ask all of them, what's the social media app everybody has to have? And I'm telling you, it never deviates. It's Snapchat. 100% of the time. No one says Instagram. They laugh at me when I say Facebook.
Yeah, they laugh.
They don't care about Twitter. Some usually the girls are more on a little bit more to TikTok, but they still prefer Snap because the experience of Snap is one of the ability to send messages and interact with content. Those two things combined make for a much more thorough experience of enjoyment to share stuff with each other as well. Whereas like on the surface, I think about TikTok, I'm like, well, TikTok, you're just scrolling through looking at stuff. And they're like, yeah, but I want to interact with my friends. I'm like, oh, see, that's where the breakdown is.
Now, granted, I asked them if they go to the Discover page to see, which is where Snapchat monetizes on those like subscription stories. And they said never. Like they literally like, we never look at that stuff. It's like TMZ gossip and all this stuff. And
I wonder though, and I don't want to go super deep on Snap, but like, I do wonder if this is just the hook though, and they can get them over there or translate it over to getting. Yeah, I think that's going to be the play there,
So you picked Amazon. I guess that leads us into discussion of Meta. So Meta collapsed about 27% on their earnings. They put up $27 billion in revenue. I think they barely missed EPS, or they beat it very slightly. But when Zuck started talking, and you and me were kind of live streaming this whole conversation, the argument from the analysts, even if not explicitly, implicitly was, will you cut down on spending? And the argument by Zuck is like, actually, no, we're going to increase it significantly over the coming 8 years. Do you think, it's not a question about the metaverse, but do you think him as a capital allocator in this situation is being unreasonable towards shareholders that are just looking for a little bit less of a cutback?
I think anyone who's never started, run, or been on the operations side of a company probably wouldn't understand his answer. But here's the truth. That was the right answer. He can't, there's no half measures, there's no halfway. In the words of Breaking Bad, there's no half gangsters, right? Like, you are either going to go all in to create this place, this product, this offering, or you are not. There's no like, well, we'll spend half as much next year and then still not have it working. I mean, it's got to be either like we're going to build this or we're stopping today and focusing on something different. There is no world where an answer of anything but an absolute would have worked to me. It speaks to the insane risk here, which is another year of spending like this without something on the other side. The stock could be, I mean, I don't even know. I don't have a good answer. It could be destroyed. It could be pummeled forever with no hopes of return, because we've talked about this before. Facebook is still a powerhouse for ads, but that is going to, at some point, that will stop, right?
Yep.
Instagram is still pretty good, but a lot of their organic growth is gone. The regulators are not going to allow them to keep buying and acquiring companies. That's clearly right. Now, all that said, though, they're still a good company and they still do a lot of good things. I think the biggest sort of thing I would say is you have to be really comfortable understanding that you cannot pay attention to what this is going to cost for a little while, and you have to be okay with that. And I think that for a lot of people, that's very, very, very difficult actually to feel okay with that. Because then it gets into the question of like, look, if you are betting on Facebook because you believe there's a massive asymmetrical return, 5x, 10x, I don't know, right?
Especially at this valuation, right?
Yeah, 20x, whatever, right? You also have to be okay admitting that like you wouldn't rather take a risk on crypto or Forex or, name your low price stock. So what you're saying is, I don't just believe in Meta, I believe in the leadership as it stands today. I believe in the idea that they're building towards and the hardware and software they're working on. And I believe in Zuck, that he's the right guy for it. And I believe that they're going to find a solution. Those are a lot of things to believe in for something that to date doesn't clearly not work and looks like really bad. I mean, really bad. Like I almost wish he didn't even release anything. I know he had to in theory, but what he released was so crappy looking. It was just like, oh man. Now I'll give you a fair comparison here. When Elon brought out the whole Tesla bot, and everyone was like, it's just a dude in a costume.
Yeah,
totally true. It was. But he also has produced a lot of cars and spaceships and put satellites in. So like it made sense that like, hey, he could theoretically use technology to switch it from making widgets to widgets, right? And like it's the same tech, it's the same team. They're just, instead of rocket ships, it's robots. What Mark's proposing is taking a company that was, since its inception, based on being an ad-driven social media site to somehow a manufacturing company in a massive software company.
yeah.
And I think that is a part of it that you have to take into consideration. But again, this is the asymmetrical side of it, that if somehow he does succeed, it's going to be huge. I keep asking myself, who else is doing this? And if I can't think of anyone, why aren't they doing it? That's the bigger question still at play. What about you? You have the $1 million. What are you going with and why?
I said Meta, or when I thought of the question, I said Meta because the metaverse thing, as you said, is an asymmetrical bet. But one of the things you pointed out makes a lot of sense to me, which is SpaceX and Tesla have done these things. Therefore, you think the bot is possible. Facebook has never created. They had a Facebook Watch or something, which they never created hardware and software platforms at scale. They created social media sites, which are just aggregations of blogs and people, and they figured out how to day trade attention, and they made a lot of money off that, which is credible to the point of why are they going to be the ones to be able to do this. Now, that also brings up the counterpoint that they're the only ones doing this, which means they have either seen a gap in the market that they think is theirs, or they see a gap in the market that they don't think Apple or other companies really want to put in $20 billion a year to go into, which is why they're going to do that. The risk is at what cost to be able to pull it off. Let me ask you a question here. If the metaverse gets 100 million users by 2030 and not a billion, is that enough for it to be a thing. Like a product that's 100 million users is big, but the next computing platform, you'd imagine all 5 billion people are on it, as per the iPhone. Does it need that many users to be the 20x, 10x return investors think they can get?
No, you know what? God, that's such a good question. I think what they need is a working functional POC, proof of concept, right? Or a POT, which is proof of technology, or even we call it a pilot, right? It's varying degrees of technical capability. Like part one is like, hey, look, here's a proof of technology. You can put these goggles on and you can see your avatar and you can move around in space. Fine. The tech seems to work in theory. It's wonky. It seems to be a little bit messed up, but in theory, there's some proof in the pudding from that perspective. The question is like, it kind of just looks like Roblox,
Yeah.
but with goggles.
Yeah.
I think that if you got to 100 million users, and if people crapped on 100 million users, I don't know what they're looking for. To me, the difference, yes, I know a billion sounds like a great number, but let's also call a spade a spade. People have to be able to afford the goggles and be on high, I'm assuming very high degree of internet speed. Otherwise, it's probably not going to work. So like, if you told me we had 100,000 users successfully using it on a regular basis and could report back on true thoughts from a retailer perspective, that would get me at least excited. I think the price would probably pop, frankly. Yeah, I mean, the goal is maybe 100 million and a billion, sure, but like, let's start with 1,000. Like, let's get 1,000 people to come out and be like, yeah, you know what? I actually couldn't live without this.
Yeah.
You know, that'd be cool. And I think that's seen nowadays as like not sexy enough, but I think the reality is it's actually a huge thing. I think there's also a ton. Look, I know you're going to agree with this statement, but I'm going to really call it out anyways. People love to like call Mark out for like all the things he's done wrong and you know, oh, he's just everything he does is terrible. It's like, listen, it's not true. Yeah. He's proving his naysayers correct right now, that he's willing to like lose everything to try to be successful at this. I mean, that's not someone that I mind getting behind. Now, if your question was if you could split the money and put it in both, then that would have been my answer, but that wasn't the question. The question was an absolute. I just think that this is an example of two very possible moonshot type of things going on. You know, I'm sure Amazon somewhere deep within the org is working on things we are definitely not aware of.
Yep.
That probably could be very competitive here as well. I don't know.
They do own Twitch, and the biggest application that I've seen is gaming for the metaverse, like
yeah,
logically speaking. I mean, there's an argument there.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, moving on to a company that has not grown its user base in like 4 years. Twitter has now newly been acquired for $44 billion by a new CEO, Elon Musk. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened. We can go deep into it, but raw thoughts after the first couple of days of this guy owning the platform. There's reports of hate speech going up. He's tweeting out some articles that aren't real. I mean, like, what are your thoughts on Elon owning it?
Okay, so I don't really talk politics a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because I don't have an interest in it. It's just in general, I'm a bit neutral because I really do try to look at the issues first. I don't vote by party. I think people would probably be surprised to hear that, but that is actually the reality of it. So I'm very much a like case by case, you know, sector by sector, issue by issue kind of person. One of the things that frustrated me the most about Trump being in office, I know this is a Twitter question, but it's going to feed into it. One of the things that really frustrated me as you know, an American who is working and raising a family and all these things wasn't what he did necessarily. It was what he said. Yeah. And it was where it was said. It was said on Twitter. And oftentimes it didn't have context, or it was totally insanity, right? Whatever. Like there's equal people who hate him and equal people who love him. And I remember thinking all the time, like, just limit it to one a day. You know, keep it within reason of what you're saying out there. And I instantly had this moment of like, oh, Elon, you don't have to share every thought you have every second that you have it just because you now own it. Like
that article he tweeted out was insane. Like it was fucking, and I'm a big Elon fanboy. I saw that shit. I'm like, this is a random blogger, and you're tweeting this against someone who got like assaulted. Maybe yes, allegedly. But like to tweet it out, 30,000 retweets, and to spread that on the platform, and then you delete it obviously because it's fake. Like, why else would you delete it?
I mean, well, and again, it's like, in order for him to turn this around, it's going to take a lot of work, effort, money, and a lot of people who are passionate about getting it turned around. You start off by saying you're going to fire 75,000 people. I'm sorry, 75% of the people, which causes all of Twitter to basically either attack the people who work there or defend the people who work there. So already we've divided the Twitter user base. There is definitely some irony in watching the amount of people who are like, well, I'm gone, I'm leaving. And, a week later, they're still on, right? But like, it's the same stuff we heard. It's like every time Elon gets into the political sphere, it just sucks problems in with it. And he has every right to say whatever he believes and do whatever he wants, 100%. But the question is, like, if the goal is to fix this and make it better, like, it's almost like you got to take a step back completely and separate yourself from the platform to do that.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems, I bought a business a long time ago. It was already operational. We acquired it. And one of the hardest things to do is to talk to managers who live their life in the business, because it's so tactical, but you think it's strategic. And it takes someone from the outside to be able to come in and say, hey, why are you doing these things? Right. And they're like, well, that's what we do. It's like, why? Tell me why. And what I really was kind of hoping to see here, because look, I think Twitter is a great platform with a great divergence of thought, of politics, of wealth, of sports, of celebrities, of entertainment. I mean, there's everything. What I really wanted to see was a less wrecking ball approach to kick it off.
Yep.
Like, before you start tweeting all kinds of stuff and letting people go and talking about what you're going to do, because that's fanfare. That's not business. I know, and I, someone wants to say like, hey, you're not Elon, he's smarter than you. Fine. That's fine. But give it a couple months until you get into the weeds of it. You see what's actually going on. You understand where the problems are. You understand where the monetization will be. Make it an exciting reason to come back to Twitter for people. Make it an exciting reason to stay on Twitter. Make it a feel-good experience for users to say, you know what? Here's why I like Twitter. It's because of the interactions. And listen, absolutely, there should be no hate speech. Full stop. There isn't even any gray area there. Get them off. Who cares? The whole free speech thing, I'm all about free speech. Like, I'll fight that to the grave. There's a humongous difference between, like, the Trump situation on there versus people like screaming like anti-Semitic terrible stuff or racist stuff. Like, that is a bubble that needs to be blown up and burnt and gone forever. Like, there's no room for that. And when people say things like, well, that's free speech, it's like you're bastardizing the entire meaning behind that, right? So the problem, though, the problem is his whole pitch was I'm going to get people back to the platform. We're still going to keep it safe. We're going to keep it reasonable. We want to have divergent thought. But then you walk in the front door like you're Ari Gold, and you're firing everyone left and right. And now they all hate you and want to leave. And then the people who are left there are left like, well, I guess eventually I'll get fired, so I don't care.
And there's no narrative here, because when he's going against,
that's my point.
When he's going against the media companies and the gas, it's like, oh yes, he's fighting the good fight. It's like when you're tweeting out random articles from random bloggers, you're not fighting the good fight here. Let's get to it some business sense. He might be charging $20 a month to verify and get a blue check. Do you think it's worth paying for the social status? But the double bind here is that if you pay for it, then you just proved people you got $240. What's the social status?
Yeah, like I tweeted something the other day. You asked a question. I forget what the exact question was, but
would you pay $5 a month for Twitter?
Yeah, and my response was, I would have no problem paying as long as we authenticate users so that I know it's a real person, not a bot, not someone in their basement with 1,000 accounts who just wants to cause problems. And my point is, I understand authentication means it'll show as being less users, but they're real users. Yes. And a real user is worth anything compared to a fake user.
100%.
So, I got a lot of you didn't see some of it because I got some DMs that were very not nice. And people are like, well, you should go after yourself because obviously you want to give your data to people to steal your ID. And I'm like, oh my God, will you stop it, please? Like, you're authenticated everywhere else already. I mean, stop. So anyways, the reason I said that, and I know you understand why, but Twitter's experience needs to be authentic, to be valuable, and to be valuable enough for me to pay. I've met a lot of good people on Twitter who I consider friends now, and I think what's made it nice is these are all real people. And it doesn't mean you can't have a picture of like, a pizza or the moon or a dog. It just means that behind the scenes, it is one person for one account. And if you own a business, you can have a business account. That's fine, but you got to show that it's a real business. And you got 10 business accounts, but there's got to be 10 real businesses. And I think that to your point, like if it's just like, oh, $240, I mean, can you imagine every lobbyist in the world is like, cool, I've got 1,000 accounts now because I don't care. I'm going to charge $1 million a month for anyways. And it's almost like all you're doing is monetizing the problem. The problem is the bots.
Yeah.
Now you're just monetizing the problem, and it's kind of like, got them. It's like you didn't get anything. The bots are doing more money than anyways.
Right. The right way to approach this would be verification across all 240 million users, and then everyone's verified. Now there is some XYZ dollar per month with some benefit or feature.
Sure. Like there
probably
has to
no
be,
ads. That would be the easiest way to get people to pay.
or maybe it's just access to special features is enough, right? Like they're already doing now. But I do think a lot of the reason why people don't engage more with Twitter, and I'm not saying that I'm an expert on Twitter, I'm far from it, but I would say that I'm an expert in social media more so than the average person.
Yeah.
And I see the back ends of these systems. I know how they work. I understand the algorithms. I understand the math. I understand the marketing that goes into it. Twitter's a great product. It's a good company, with problems. And I think that if the goal is to suss out these problems and you boiled it down to one simple thing, monetization, ads, users, violence, all the negative things that stem from those all come from the fact that you have non-authenticated users. Because some piece of crap who is spelling hateful speech and misinformation isn't a real person. Like you're fighting with a robot, and I think a lot of folks don't realize these bots are really simple. I mean, I don't want to I won't overshare because I'm obviously no one's paying me to do it, but like there are several companies I can tell you right off the tip of my tongue that you can go and build a bot in under half an hour and sign it up for a Twitter account, and it is going to be just like a real person. It's going to know how to talk and act. Yeah, it's not true AI, but it's functionally chat AI.
Right.
And you can tell because they've got 0 followers and they instantly follow you, and they always are you're beautiful and have pictures of places they don't live. So there
were a couple of girls that did that to me, and I thought they were real. I was like,
yeah,
oh, Nadine
I'm sure
wants my number.
your followers probably, mine definitely not.
No, mine not.
I just think that you solve all of those problems the moment you add accountability to the platform. It's easy to say hateful things when no one will ever find out who you are.
So gun to your head, does he solve this in the next 5-6 years, make it profitable?
When you sign up, you have to show some form of ID or something that is unique to just you, a license number, a photo ID. Now, I do want to call out that there's caveats to this that make it difficult. An example would be in certain places, people quite literally cannot afford an ID. And someone might hear that and be like, oh, that's bullcrap. It's like, that's not bullcrap. There are places in the world where Twitter is accessed where that might be very difficult to get. That said, I don't think that's the real problem here. I don't think the problem is a random person who just wants to see what's going on outside of the regime they live under. I think the real problem is that bots are highly monetized strategic efforts to control outcomes, whether it's to get people to buy stuff, vote a certain way, or whatever. It's just it's the reality of it. I mean, the benefit of working both in this space and the AI and machine learning space is that I not only get to see the back ends, but I understand how they work. And it's so easy to build a bot that you could deploy against social media. And I think the average person who doesn't do this rightfully shouldn't understand this. It doesn't make sense to know it. But it is so easy. I mean, you could spin up 1,000 Amets by the end of the day and have them all go out and sign up for you, subscribe every single day to your channel. Next thing you know, you're this huge channel. The only way to have a true control of the platform is accountability, and accountability can only be achieved via authentication. Now, that said, I think it's perfectly fine to have non-authenticated users, but it needs to be some sort of a mark of like, this is a real person, and it shouldn't necessarily cost money. But there has to be some path of knowing that the person you're interacting with is a human being. And if people go on there and they threaten and they say terrible things and whatever, and by the way, I don't mean say terrible things like F you or you're an idiot or whatever. Like, yeah, that whatever. That's just you're an idiot.
We're talking about 4chan type of stuff.
Correct. Right? I'm talking like real bad things, like inciting violence, stuff like that. You know what I mean? So and it's funny, even hearing myself say that, I question to what degree I'd even want to see that enforced. But there just simply are.
There's lines in the sand. It's like that famous case where the person brought up pornography. Is it art? And the guy, I don't know if you ever heard this guy's like, I know it is when it is, right?
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. It's a fine line, but I do think for me, it comes down simple. Authentication also leads to profitability. I really feel that way.
Yeah. I agree. One company that's not profiting and is really annoyed is Spotify. Daniel Ek, CEO of Spotify, says Apple continues to disadvantage competitors and the impact is huge on consumers, apps developers, and now authors and publishers now that they're in audiobooks. Without policymakers taking action, nothing will change. I can't be the only one who sees the absurdity. This is a CEO of a $15 billion company, I believe, pleading for someone to recognize that they're just trying to make money off audiobooks and they're trying to figure out a way for Apple to not take 30% of buying it in-app through an IAP, in-app purchase. And Apple's rejecting their new update from the App Store because Spotify is giving them people a link to just go to a Safari browser instead of buying it within the Apple ecosystem. Question for you. Do you think Apple is just getting away with absolute absurdity by this 30% fee on companies like Spotify that already, they can barely compete with Apple because of the $10 subscription versus what's going on?
I am very surprised that Apple skirts all regulation and penalties for the things they do. All you hear about is everyone else either being in front of Congress or being fined or having class action suits or what's the word I'm looking for at a government level? There's so much sugar in my veins from Halloween here.
I've got mine right here. I'm waiting till after this. I got
I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but sanctions get put on these companies. I mean, like, you hear it constantly. And it is true that, like, Apple on a whim, I mean, it wasn't a whim, but you know what I mean? On seemingly what probably felt like a whim was like, okay, no more tracking. And tons of companies were like, well, now we can't make any money now. And in theory, yeah, what they did was a great thing and people cheered it. And it did seem like the right thing. I felt that too. And then ironically, then it was like, well, I mean, unless you're using our products, then we can track whatever we want. So that's yes. And yeah, I won't speak specifically to Spotify because I don't feel like I have enough knowledge to speak intelligently on that front. But there is something, the fact that they can essentially create whatever paywall they want.
It brings up a concern. It's a little too powerful. I mean,
it does feel antitrust. I mean, just how do you not feel like it's an antitrust platform? I mean, like when Microsoft did it, they were held over the coals. When Google tries to do stuff, they get brought in front of Congress. My God, Zuck, this dude's been in front of Congress so much, I think he might be a congressman at this point. But yeah, man, Apple sort of just skirts by. I mean, and there's some irony in this too, in the fact that we know that they make their phones in Chinese factories, and they charge a lot for it, and they're expensive phones, and they're on expensive phone plans, and what they decide to load on that phone will automatically be successful without a doubt. Where an app shows up in the design is going to determine how successful it is. Most likely, it's no different than first page Google, right? Like, it's the same thing with the apps.
Is the tweet I put out the other day? There was a video on YouTube that popped up from a guy who has 10 subs a year ago. The channel is really not successful. It popped into the feed. I mean, like, if it's there, people will have a chance to consume it. And if Apple says, "Hey, look at Apple Books over Spotify audiobooks,"
yeah, it's tough, and it really brings up a good point though, that like you're trying to accomplish the same thing, frankly, with audio, which is, give people an opportunity to discover things that they otherwise wouldn't. But in order to get people to your platform, they have to use an app, and to get to that app, they have to get it off of one of two options that are available, right? And it's like there just isn't a solution to that, and there's no way to compete with them either.
Yeah.
So, at some point, there is a scenario that exists where it's like, you can compete with this is an interesting. I always have a lot of pauses when we talk because we go deeper than I initially mean to, and then I'm like, I might as well just say what I'm thinking.
Yep.
You
I love
know,
it.
you're running the SoFi weekly call,
Yep.
and the interesting thing there is that it would take very little for the two of us to spin up a fintech platform. Not talking about a bank just yet, right? We'll get to that point in a second. We can go and we can offer commercial lending on a website, throw some AI behind it, probably raise a little bit of money and start running that company. And then over time, we can add things like, we can try to apply for a bank charter, or maybe buy a smaller bank that has a charter in place, or work our way through it and hire someone who can get a charter. And then you add more services, you add checking and savings, you add business, and you add mortgages, and you do student loans, and sort of like that SoFi play. Now, SoFi is clearly the 800-pound gorilla in terms of this, but just making the point, there's nothing they could do to really stop you. I mean, people
Right.
can choose to bank with them or bank with your new bank that you're working on.
It's the beauty of
Uh,
capitalism.
Standard, right? And if they don't offer good rates and good services, then they're going to come to your bank. If you offer a better savings rate, people will just go there to get the savings rate. That's fine. That's how banks work. You get a free toaster when you sign up, right? And people don't want to go into banks anyways, so they are happy to do it all online. The problem with where we're at with tech today is that that's how tech always was.
Yeah.
Tech was really the place where you could go and start at zero, using your brain, your fingers, and a $1,000 laptop, build a $1 billion enterprise.
Yep.
The problem now is people aren't starting companies to eventually grow big and IPO. They're starting them to get bought by the bigger players.
Yeah.
I personally do, I know, like I've done it recently. So like the challenge here is, why would anyone even want to compete with them to have no shot at winning?
Yeah.
So then you almost, it's easy for them to claim like, well, it's not really a monopoly because we're not stopping anyone from competing. And you're like, well, that's true. But like, then what's going to happen is Apple can come down and be like, oh, I noticed you're putting your app on the Sean phone. That's not good for us. We don't like that. I guess we're going to have to raise those prices a little bit,
All right.
and they can have any reasonable answer they want. Google can do the same, and whoever else. I think that it presents a real scary issue, which is they've taken the competitiveness out of the space. I mean, the
counterpoint to that is they brought everyone together in one place to enable competition. Do you think there's an argument for that there's billions of people searching for apps? Because that's the argument Google and Apple give. They're like, hey, we're bringing you all I mean, that's what YouTube is saying. Hey, we're bringing the traffic. We can take 55% of the revenue, or 45, whatever.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, but then they also control the data flows to the apps.
Yeah. That is
They
true.
also control the access via the plan. There's no if I have to have Apple to access the apps, how do I get to the apps if I don't want to have an Apple account?
Right.
Right? Like there's no getting an app without signing up for Apple or Google, right? I can't just get them. To say it's a platform where I can get them is one thing, but it still requires me to log in and access
have an
information.
iPhone.
It's a slippery slope. I agree. Like I'm all for like growing big companies and everything else. I just also think that we're not talking about companies of the old days who were like, hey, cool, we're trying to grow like crazy and hire more people. Now we're talking about companies with 100 million billion rather dollars on the shelf. And I think that's probably the bigger struggle. I mean, I think about what you're doing is like a perfect example of, you went into it eyes wide open. You're doing a good job. You're rocking and rolling already, right? I know what's going on. So you're doing good and you're building and you're growing every month, and you're getting creative and you're looking for new ways to do that. And you're trying to apply force multipliers to everything you do. But at the end of the day, you also know, like, you're taking on not one, not two, but like really 5, 6, 7 Goliaths.
Yeah.
Mega funded.
Which is why a lot of my outcome, or my thoughts on the outcome, are if we get decent enough where they feel scared, we have a good outcome. But it's not the IPO. And like, that would be amazing. But
Sure,
it's I'm also not an idiot. I'm also not naive to the reality.
Well, I mean, it's just there's a natural state of effect. Like Sirius and XM were competing with each other, and then suddenly realize, like, oh my god, we can't compete with these guys. So they merge, right?
Yeah.
Now, who uses Sirius and Sirius XM, right? Maybe in the car if you have it, but like no one's really using it that much because now they're on Spotify. Like we used to have Sirius XM in one of our vehicles. When the renewal came up, we were like, no, to hell with this. And my wife uses Spotify on the phone for it. My kids use it.
What's interesting on this real quick? Sirius XM did $9 billion of revenue last year. Spotify did 10 billion. And that's very interesting to me. A media company did the same revenue as a tech company. That's when I realized there's an issue with monetization when it comes. Why are they doing the same as a media company? That's interesting.
Well, you know what? This is a good segue to the same conversation we're having anyways, which is really the fact that I think people have to just accept that, like, in the 18 and 1900s, it was all about energy, gas, oil, fuel, kerosene. We switched for quite a few years now, several decades, into really data and tech. I really have been saying this a lot lately. You've been saying it a lot. I think we've all been saying it, is like, content and media
Yeah.
is the new energy and data.
So let's talk about that YouTube short thing. Yeah, this is great. I totally forgot about that. You said that art is the new math,
Math,
essentially. You
yeah.
said art matters more than math. And
Yep.
I don't think you were saying computer science doesn't matter and all this stuff doesn't matter. It's probably great if you have one of those degrees. But I think what you were really saying, what you were speaking to, at least my soul, is like, hey, ambitious person that happened to come on Invest to Live's short. You might really want to change the world. Getting a computer science degree or going into tech, that's fine. You'll make some money, but changing the world means people need to give a fuck about you.
Right.
And that's where art comes in. Can you speak to what your point was on that short?
100%. So for years and years and years, people are told, listen, go and become an accountant, get into finance, go into business. That's the right route to take. You don't want to be doing interpretive dance and an art degree and content and media and film direction. There's no money in that,
And
because
for
it was
good reason. It was super hard to build a career on that.
not, and the reason it was because there were only a few firms who held the strings of power, because there was no ability to get capital.
Mm.
Um, Tech enabled us to have platforms for free to make our own money on. So when I say that in the coming decade, art is more important than math, what I really mean is the distributed nature of the products. When I think about math, I'm thinking about the fact that much of what's done in an office of finance now can be automated via computer. You enter a couple of things, it connects the APIs to the transactional data systems, it pulls it, it runs it, it audits it, it reports it, a CFO signs off on it and sends it to the IRS.
Mm.
AI, machine learning, computers, they cannot put two people on a podcast together to have a conversation for an hour about 15 different topics. It can't dance for 15 seconds on a video and generate $20 million in revenue for itself. Right. And I think what we've finally realized is, at the end of the day, people want to be entertained by what entertains them, not what they're told to watch on the 80 different channels they might have access to, even though it's all the same.
Right.
And it's about having a distributed network of content creation from the creators, delivered it to the people who are seeking entertainment from them. And the real crux of what I meant was, the kids and the adults too, for that matter, who were told, like, you know, nobody cares about art. There's no money in that. Nobody cares about, you talking about technology or investing. There's no money in that. Don't talk about finance. Get a finance degree and work in a cubicle all day for 12 hours. And then here, both of us are a great example of, like, I do like a video a day or so, sometimes two, sometimes not every day, but whatever. You do the same, a couple a day. It it is like the easiest thing in the world. I love it. It's the most enjoyable thing I do in my life, and I have a good life. I mean, I do, but
Yeah,
like,
pizza on Fridays every Friday. I see it.
well, it's super enjoyable. I get to find people who are talking about exactly what I like to talk about, exactly in the way I like to hear it. And then I watch funny things, and I watch, like, cool stuff. And, like, my son and I were talking about some lacrosse training, and we found a video of, like, how they do this special thing, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. It's a professional player showing you for free how to do it, something you couldn't find any before. And, like, my daughter's in a pretty competitive dancing program, and like ballet and stuff like that. And they're super talented kids. And back in the day, you'd be like, oh, that there's no future in that.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree. I mean, I think now we've realized that, like, art, entertainment, sport, like, when it's in the hands of the few, it stinks. When it's in the hands of the many, it's great. And when I say art, I really mean the interpretation of how you want to deliver your message,
Yes. Yep.
across any platform, any means, any form that you want. Whereas math is very, very particular. It's very perfect. It follows a very specific flow, right? Math has to be perfect, or it's no longer math. And there's a place for it. But for me, the future of business is in content creation and media of any type that you're comfortable doing, because the distributed platforms exist. And actually, that part of that, to be totally frank, I'm sure you picked up on it, but, like, even just like yourself, you have a platform that I can go and easily sign up for free and start putting out my own content on. And if I'm not comfortable doing video on YouTube, I can do audio on Audio. I can write a book and have it read on Audible.
But an article on Medium. It's, I mean,
exactly.
It's interesting. You said you make a video a day and you kind of brushed it off. You're like, it's easy, it's fun, I like to do it. Yeah. One of the reasons it's easy is because you are someone like me, more natural at communication. I mean, in your job and your day to day, you do a lot of communicating, which I would say is more art than anything. What you're doing. You're working with people and trying to get them to see your perspective and views. And the beautiful thing about this time period is that 50 years ago, naturally creative people like you and me, creative not meaning we're Michael Jackson, but that we know how to talk, we can get a message across. We just didn't have the distributive mechanism to get the world to care. I mean, I'm in my parents' house right now, and there's 15,000 people on YouTube that kind of care about it. That's insane to me.
It's insane.
That's absolutely insane.
I mean, think about the truest way to look at it. If you wanted to be a famous actor or actress, you would have had to go to Hollywood, hopefully get lucky. Who knows what you have to do to get there. Terrible things, a lot of terrible stories come out, and then you find out half these people are related to them anyways.
Yeah,
Hollywood is
like
all
Harvard.
aunts and uncles and fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers. And now if someone came up to me and said, man, I just wish I could be in the movies, I'd say, sure, get a camera and make a movie and put it on YouTube.
But that's scary for people because now they don't have an excuse, right? You want to chase your dreams. It's like there is zero reason you can't chase a dream. It's right there. And there's been people with shittier situations than you, with shittier cameras than you, that have become multi-hundred millionaires off social because they just put it out.
Totally true. I mean, I was a non-believer years ago. I actually got my first YouTube channel in 2012.
Yeah.
But then I just got so busy with work and I didn't understand the value of it. I look at it now and I don't think people realize how much money is in this. It's deceptively scalable. Yeah. Whether I have one person watching what I make or 1 million people watching, it changes nothing for me how long it takes. And I get a lot of good. What I find is also really the best part about it is I feel very blessed to have such unbelievable folks who watch my content, and a lot of them give me great feedback. Like, hey, I love your stuff. Have you thought about getting a different angle in the light? Or like, hey, sometimes it's grainy on the internet. Or
and if that's the worst feedback they can give, if it's nothing about the actual content, you're onto something.
Well, really and that's exactly it. Is like, where else can you be not only creative, but in real time get real time feedback? So the next time you're like, hey, thanks so much. I didn't realize I had my setting wrong. I would never have known if you didn't tell me. Yeah. I mean, perfect example. Chris Patel, one of our favorite people in the whole world. Chris was like, I was like, oh, I think something wrong with my microphone. And Chris in real time was like, the microphone's totally good. You're good to go. Instead of having to shut down and restart and plug everything in, one person in 10 seconds was like, everything's fine. You're good. That would have caused a set to be shut down for 2 weeks while they figured out if there was a broken cord, right? And the costs that go with it, et cetera, et cetera. And anyways, the point of me saying art versus math was I really think that there has to be a major mind shift that you can't approach art the same way you approach math.
What do you mean by that?
It is not exact. It is not going to be perfect. There are going to be phrases that come off. Guess what? A decimal point doesn't matter in art. It doesn't matter if your forecast was off by 3%. What's important is that you understand your audience and what they value, and you deliver on both your values and what they'd like to see, because you're catering both to yourself and to your audience. And that's why the monetization exists in the way it does. I think that there are very few things that I've experienced in my career. And it's just funny. I've had a long career. I've been very successful financially. I've done very well. I 100% can say this with confidence that I believe that you could be the executive vice president of a huge company, or you could have a huge channel on YouTube for free and make the same money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not guessing, right? We both know it's the absolute truth of it. And the difference is one requires 10 years of school and an MBA and working for 25 years to work your way up. The other is consistently telling stories that are interesting, based a lot of times in truth, or they could be creative concepts, of course, too, whatever. But like, it could be anything. It could be showing pictures of my dog and my kids. It could be having artwork over my shoulder, or it could be talking about complex derivatives and the wheel strategy for options.
Yeah.
People, I think, get very scared and very nervous around this idea that well, what if they don't like the way I look or the way that I talk or that like this topic isn't interesting? I could talk about candy canes and hallucinations and I'm going to find 1,000 people. Um,
I'm here. I'm here.
Yep, no worries.
There we go.
I think there's a really cool dichotomy that goes on in the world where there are a lot of people who are just like you, and it doesn't always feel that way when you're sitting in your boring job in a cubicle staring at a screen for 12 hours a day. And there's communities that love what you do and want to hear your story and hear the cubicle experience and what you deal with every day. I mean, there's TV
There's
shows that talk
people
about that.
vlogging them Ubering every day that are getting
For sure.
100,000 views
Yep.
because it's an interesting experience.
And the theme of our show oftentimes goes to the macro, and that's the point that I really want to make here. Is I'm going to steal this actually from Mr. Beast because I did hear him say this a long time ago. So I don't remember what he said, but I remember the theme of what he said. Essentially, someone said to him, like, look, you make a lot of money. Why don't you go start your own Beast YouTube, right? Your own version of YouTube. And he was like, what? Why? What? I have global access to billions of people for zero cost. Think about that. Zero cost. I don't think people really understand how significant that is in terms of the fact that you for $0, if you're already watching YouTube, whether it's on a phone or a laptop or whatever else, you already now have enough equipment to start and run a channel that has the ability to access the macro world. You study a little bit of SEO, you learn how to write a good paragraph here or there, you learn how hashtags work, and you can access topics at a global macro level. You can talk about things from finance, and you can talk about math within your media, but it doesn't have to be math that you're doing.
It's exciting. It's an
It's
exciting
really
time to
very
be alive.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm?
I think it's an exciting time to be alive and
It is,
actually
yeah,
try
it is.
and try. Okay. Last 5 minutes.
Yep.
Pound to earnings next week.
Yep.
Thoughts? You made a video. They have a lot of cash, as you
Yep.
said. That's
Well,
excited you.
I want to give you a good clip here for a short clip. One of the questions I keep getting asked about is what am I missing about Palantir? Why aren't we seeing big things happening? What is something they could do? And I want to share a couple of quick thoughts here. First and foremost, one thing I'm hearing a lot is like, oh, maybe they can do a B2C model and really get out to the consumer. What I would argue that could be just as effective, but have massive scale and huge margins would be if they go to an OEM or ASL model. An OEM ASL model will allow them to scale across lots of platforms.
What does that mean? OEM ASL.
OEM is essentially embedded in someone else's software or product. ASL is called application specific licensing, where it's the way they sell it only for a specific use case. So imagine, if you will, Palantir solves for 1,000 possible things. They'll allow Amit Software Corp to install it in their product for these 3 things only. If they want one of those 3, they have to come to you and buy the full-blown version from Palantir.
Okay. Interesting.
So it offers them the ability to get into other people's products, into other people's SKUs, into other people's offerings. That's one piece of it. The other piece that I got a really great question on, which was a phenomenal question, and I saw Grogu ask the question sort of openly on Twitter, and I responded, and I saw that you liked it right before this call. He was saying that Palantir was talking about the fact that they're going to help more people get more access to high-level security clearance.
Yep.
This is a concept that, again, if you're not in the operational side of software, there's no reason you would know this. The value of really big platforms is they create the framework for your product to live within to be able to gain compliance. So when things like SOX compliance, email compliance in Canada, Fed compliance on different topics, right? European
GDPR. Yeah.
Bingo. Yes, exactly. You took that right out of my mouth, actually. GDPR. What I want them to sell me a product that has the framework built in. So once my data goes into it, I'm able to remain compliant and use that product. I think that's an area people don't truly understand about software like this. It is the protocol and the framework to allow you to do more once it's in there and set up a certain way. So those are 2 super easy areas. Not to say it just would be an overnight thing, but those are really great instances where you could find mass delivery. And when I say OEM and ASL versus B2C, what I don't mean is you don't go to B2C. What I'm saying is I don't want them to spend their time building an entire division around B2C and hiring people and training and building new products. What I'm saying is there might be 2 or 3 really common use cases that the average consumer needs that they can spin up a simple solution off of what they've already built and offer that within someone else's platform. I'll give you a great example of this. IBM Watson was included in H&R Block's tax software a couple of years back, and it was automatically looking for things you missed on your tax return to save more money. That's a great example of commercializing for the everyday person a really complex product, where it just puts the name in front of them of like, oh wow, Watson's going to help me with my taxes. That's amazing.
Right.
And, you don't really know what it's doing or not doing, but it sounds really cool, and it's an easy way to take advantage of the work you've already done.
Right.
So I
That's a
haven't heard
very
anyone
interesting,
talk
like,
about
because a lot of people have been asking for this consumer product. This is a much stronger answer that I've heard, which is that if they're going to be an application layer for a lot of these B2B clients, if they license the application and certain segments of it to thousands of it, that's a different way to scale versus going to the $8 billion,
Listen, man.
8 billion person TAM that is the
Yeah.
consumer.
Like when you buy a house, you don't rip the walls open to see what brand of electric wire is behind the walls.
Yeah. Yep.
Be the wiring, be the plumbing, and you get access to everything that flows through. Now,
Yeah.
to your specific question on the earnings, I have nothing to say. I don't have any feel at all. I mean, I would love to be super bullish because I want to be. I don't know. I don't know how they can deliver bad news. And I don't mean this in a naive way, by the way.
Yeah.
But the amount of contracts they've won. I mean, even some of the commercial wins you're hearing about, like, you have to assume there's some good news in here. And we know they're still sitting on a lot of assets. We know they're sitting on a lot of credit and cash. I don't know. I mean, unless the analysts are looking for something that's totally out of whack of reality, I feel like it's going to be a pretty decent report. But I'm also starting to get a feel for the fact that, like, we're just not moving around from a price perspective.
Yeah.
I preach this all the time, so I'm gonna preface this by saying I don't really care about stock price. I care more about the primary function of the company and the valuation there within. The derivative pricing is in fact the stock, et cetera, et cetera. But in this case, I want to talk about the stock because it has been stuck in a range now for quite some time. And it seems like no amount of good news is going to move it. And
Yeah.
for the people who are getting frustrated by that, again, not financial advice, right? Sometimes when you're looking at something like this, it's very hard to think in terms of value because it isn't a specific product. You can't count how many, Palantir iPhones are going out the door, or how many loans Palantir has launched, or how many houses Palantir has sold. So it can be tough sometimes to really understand the compression of opportunity. But I I like to think about things in really simple ways. I imagine there's just a big spring under every company. And the more value you keep piling into the company, and you keep piling and you keep piling, and it's going to keep pushing that spring down and down and down and down. And at some point, that energy has built up so much that when it finally pops, it's going to blow straight up, right? Now, that could mean 10%, it could mean 20, it could mean 200%. I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is at some point, the value of the contracts, the top and bottom lines, and the margins are going to determine the value of the stock price based on expansion of multiples in the next couple of years, because I think that's a big miss here for a lot of retail investors too. When we think about valuing a tech company, it's about getting multiple expansion. So that's where you get the stock price movement. It's not so much tied to actual revenue, right? It should be in theory, but it's not really, right? So
and
that's
you think that
what
multiple expansion comes with a better macro, essentially.
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. What do you think? What's your take on this?
I just think they've been too public for the past 3 months for them to deliver bad. Like Q2 was not good. They beat their numbers, but it just wasn't good. I don't know if they hit it out of the park in this one, but I don't think they shit the bed. I don't think that's gonna happen. So
cool.
We'll
Yeah, I would tend to agree with the fact that, like, there's just been so many big wins. I don't know. It's hard to there is that point where it's hard to ignore the wins. But what I do want is I want an update on their partner program, their training program. I'd like to see an update on that. And I'd also like to get a better understanding of, like, what I would like to hear more are customer references that can be shared publicly. I know they had a good one, and that's great, but I need 15, I need 20, I need 25, That's when you start to get the momentum that starts to roll itself forward, because you want more and more I team and BI teams to take this product on. They're going to have to be able to go, and a lot of people, if you don't work in software sales, a lot of customers will say, hey, cool, I'm ready to sign once I talk to 2 customers who are currently deploying this, and not a recorded story. I want to speak to them on the phone without you on the phone, by the way. And I'll tell you for a fact, you in the back of your mind, you're like, here's the 3 people I will absolutely, no one else is allowed to talk to them about these 3 people. Not because it's not successful, but because, they've really got a groove. They're doing really well. They really understand the value. So once that's there and they've got those people, and they probably do have those people, we just don't know them publicly necessarily. Once they have that, that's when I think the ball can really start to roll and it starts to sell itself. Now it turns from a conversation about, do I need this product, into a conversation of like, how much am I going to pay, and what's my contract term going to look like, and what's my contract writing going to look like. That's when they start to really, get better and better and better. And they're still a relatively lean company. So even in the downturn in recessionary terms, things like teeny and headcount don't seem to be a major problem there. And I don't want to go into details of why I know this, but they also don't F around with employees who aren't hitting their numbers. So, like, if you're not doing well, you're going to be pipped out. And, that's something obviously a company that size has to take serious. So I've heard that from a few people I know that work there and have worked there. So,
okay.
That's my take on that.
Excited. Thank you all for listening and watching again. We really appreciate your attention. The feedback we get is awesome from you guys.
Agreed. Yeah.
Another week of not financial advice, and here to the next 365 weeks we're gonna be doing.
Love it, baby. We got to get Gary Vee on for our 100th show.
Oh man, you got to get him. We got to
start putting it out there.
I love it. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching, listening. See you on the next one.
See you guys.